Welcome to today's classroom. This is my hometown, Lake Charles, Louisiana. What can we learn from someone who watched his hometown being bombed when he was 7 years old, who was put into an internment camp with his parents for 3 years and during which his mom passed away, who came to America and was put in school after not being in school for 3 years, was bullied and ridiculed, but still earned his high school diploma, college degree, and a master's degree, and went on to be an educator for over 50 years. What can we learn from someone such as this? Well, here's your chance. You have an amazing story, though, Pete. What you've been through, people need to know about it. And hello, everyone. This is Charles McNeely for DevDoc Theater. And it is an honor and an enormous privilege to introduce you to Mr. Pete Casanave, who I'm in Lake Charles, Louisiana. And Pete, you're in Madrid, Spain?
Well, at this moment, I'm in Madrid, Spain. Yes, I'm at my daughter's house.
Daughter's house, Diana. Yes. But you're from?
I live in a small city called Cartagena, which is more in the southeast of Spain,
gotcha.
on the Mediterranean coast. My mother was called Maria del Carmen. She was from the Philippines, but my father, Emilio, and his father was American, and his mother was Filipina. His father, Pedro was our grandfather. Andrew's grandfather and all the cousins' grandfather, but most of them didn't know him because he died before most of them were born. He was an American soldier who was in the Spanish-American War, and he was sent to the Philippines because of the Spanish-American War when the Americans conquered the Philippines and took it over from Spain.
Yes.
And the soldiers were encouraged to stay, as those who wanted to, and they were given some benefits and so on. And my grandfather stayed, and he got a photography business, a professional photographer, and he set up a nice business in photography. And there he got married to a Filipino girl whose mother was Spanish, but he was 36 years old by that time, and she was 16. So 20 years difference there. It resulted in a great marriage. And they had four children, 4 boys. The eldest boy was my father, Emilio. My mother's father had also an interesting story because he was a French Jew. Levy was his name, last name. Levi, probably. Yeah. And he was sent to Manila with a couple of brothers to establish a jewelry business there because they had one in France. He comes from a jewelry business family, and they established in Manila. And then the one man, Alphonse, my mother's father, was sent to Iloilo to establish a branch, I guess, there. Yeah. And that's where he met my grandmother, who was a Filipino girl. And so you see, it's a mix of a lot of people.
Very much. That's some great stories. That's wonderful.
My grandfather, because he was a French Jew, he was kicked out of his house, kicked out of his family because he married a Catholic. Not only kicked out of the family, he was kicked out of the business. And he had to find employment in another jewelry store because he knew a lot about the business, according to what my family told me later. Because I didn't know him. Actually, I didn't know him at all. But he started also his own little business. And my grandfather, Pedro, knew him because my grandfather, Pedro, liked to buy jewels for my grandmother, who was so much younger, and I guess he had to compensate somehow. Yes. And got her. And so he was a good customer, and that's how they met. And that's how my father met my mother. But my grandfather, Pedro, who was a soldier, was a widower. He had a son in the United States called Ted. But Ted later, once my grandfather got established, Ted went to the Philippines to live with him and my grandmother. The problem, well, not the problem, but the curious thing was that he was almost the same age as Teresa, my grandfather's wife. Because there was a 20-year difference between them.
Yes.
So the stepson and the stepmother were almost the same age.
Oh my goodness!
But they got along very well. They loved each other very much. They got along tremendously because both were wonderful people.
Yeah, that's good respect. That's good family respect. So that's nice.
Ted later got married in the Philippines to a Baptist missionary woman. They went to a concentration camp because he was American. Okay. And then they went back to America with us. Gotcha. And then he went to Detroit, where the wife's family lived, and they lived in Detroit.
Got you.
They didn't go to New Orleans with us.
Got you.
The other son of Pedro and Teresa was also called Pedro, which is Andrew's father.
Real? Okay, that's okay. I wasn't sure what Andrew's
father and my father were brothers.
That's yes. Okay.
Now we can go on to December the 7th. The important date for me was December 8th, the day after, because that's when the Japanese bombed Iloilo. They bombed especially Iloilo because Iloilo had an important American Navy base. And of course, the city was hit also. But fortunately, the 8th of December, it was a national holiday in the Philippines because it's the 8th of December. Is the Immaculate Conception. That was a national holiday for the Philippines, being a Catholic country. Fortunately, many workers were not at the base when it was bombed. Unfortunately, the Americans were, who were stationed there. But the Filipino workers were home. Part of the city was bombed too, especially the central part where we lived was bombed. Not my house, but near my house, because I remember looking out the window and watching the bombs fall. I was at home with my mother and my mother's mother. And since my grandmother was in hysterics, my mother was trying to calm her down, and I was left alone at the window watching the bombs and watching the houses blow up. And that I cannot forget.
I can imagine.
When the bombing stopped for my father, who had been at my other grandparents' home at the time, came running for us and took us to the other grandmother's home, which was bigger and safer, I guess. When I remember going there, he held me in his arms, and I could see the devastation all around the city as we passed and going to my other Pedro and Teresa's home, where they lived, and to sit out the bombing there. And fortunately, we were okay. After the bombing, we went to a plantation. My grandmother Teresa's family had a sugar plantation in the mountains someplace, which her brothers controlled and ran. They were older than she was. And we went to that plantation to get away from the city.
Yeah.
And so we were there for a while until the Japanese finally did invade the Philippines much later. I have a note here, it was in January. So it was almost a month after.
Right, yeah.
And
quite a few weeks.
They invaded the Philippines, and they found us. And they captured all the Americans. My grandfather, Pedro, was American, and all his 4 sons were Americans, or 5 sons, including Ted. And that's when they were put in a sort of a concentration camp in Iloilo first.
Iloilo, okay.
The wives didn't have to go. My mother didn't have to go. Pedro's wife, Greta, didn't have to go, but they all went with their husbands. Uncle Pedro, who was recently married, went to the camp with Greta. And these Pedro and Greta were the parents of Andrew's parents.
Okay. So they were there too. Andy's parents.
That's right. I don't know how long we were in Iloilo concentration camp, but very short time until we were moved to Manila. And there is where Santo Tomas comes in.
Okay.
Santo Tomas was a university and it was turned into a concentration camp. And we were in the concentration camp in Santo Tomas, separated, men and women. The men were put in they told me much later, we were put in the gym on cots, and the women were put in classrooms. But I stayed with my father in the gym, although
I was going to ask. Okay.
Because my mother was ill. She wasn't feeling good. She was very ill. And so actually while we were in Santo Tomas, she died while we were in Santo Tomas.
I'm so sorry.
That was on July 18th. Yes. July 18th,
the same year.
1943.
You got in January, and then in July, she passed.
And so that's why I stayed with my father. And of course, I was with my grandparents also, of course, and my aunt and uncle, Andy's parents also took care of me. And then from Santo Tomas, we were sent to Los Baños. Because Santo Tomas became too crowded. And so they set up another concentration camp in Los Baños. Los Baños was called that because it's called the bath. Because it was a place where people went to relax with lots of gardens and fruit trees and so on.
You talk about irony.
And that was converted into a concentration camp because everything was there already, the rooms and so on. And so that's where we were the last part of the concentration camp in Los Baños, which wasn't a place to relax at all. No. Lots of people died from malnutrition. My father had to work in the fields. My uncle did also. And then in Los Baños, my cousin Peter, Andrew's oldest brother, was born in the concentration camp.
Oh my gosh.
It was almost like a miracle because very few babies were born alive in the concentration camp because the mothers were too weak.
Of course.
But fortunately, my aunt Greta was a very strong woman, young woman, and she delivered Peter. And they told me that there was also had a very good doctor, an American doctor at the camp who helped deliver Peter. And so he was born there January 9th, 1945.
Wow. So right before it ended, basically.
Exactly. Right before it ended. He was born, it was like a miracle. So my aunt was busy with him. My grandmother was busy with my grandfather because he was very weak. He was losing his eyesight. And I was free to roam around the camp. I was never freer inside a camp. Ironically, I was never freer in all my life. I could do what I want. I ran around in small khaki shorts, tattered shorts, and with a couple of other kids. I don't remember their names at all now. And we ran around the camp, waving at the Japanese, I should say, and they waved at us. And so we ran around. The ones who suffered most at the camp were the adults, actually, because they are psychologically not being fed. The little food they gave to the children,
Yes.
And of course, at that time, I didn't realize that. I was told that much later.
A contrast being in an internment camp, but being free at your age to go and
no school because there was no school.
Yes.
So for 3 years, I didn't go to school.
That's right.
Running around barefooted. They told me later, and there were 8 days when the Japanese disappeared. They left the camp. And,
why?
And I don't remember why anymore, but I remember that there's a committee of the prisoners who sort of controlled everybody to organize things. And the committee told us to stay where we were, not to go out of the camp and to wait to see what happens. But the good thing is that the Filipinos came in and brought us food to be able to eat. And the bad thing is many of the prisoners in the camp raided the Japanese quarters and stole a lot of things from the Japanese. And so when they came back, they came back very angry because they searched the barracks until they found most of the things that had been stolen and so on. And they treated us worse as a sort of revenge because of that, until, of course, we were rescued. Yes, that morning, I didn't know at the time either, but I was told much later. Every morning at 7 o'clock, we lined up to be counted and so on. And that day, we were supposed to be all killed, all the prisoners, because the Japanese were going to leave because the Americans were getting close.
Of course.
So they had to get rid of us. And the only way to get rid of us is to shoot us all down on that morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. But fortunately, at 5 minutes to 7, the Americans came down in parachutes from airplanes to rescue us. And
you talk about the cavalry arrives.
That's it, exactly.
There were paratroopers?
When like angels. I thought of them as angels coming down from heaven. And I thought maybe I'm dead and I'm in heaven already.
That is amazing.
We went back to the barracks because the Japanese were busy defending themselves. They forgot us. My father put me under the bed. There was a lot of shooting and so on going on because Americans came and also Filipino guerrillas joined.
Oh. Wonderful.
They were organized. This had been organized before by General MacArthur, and so he saved our lives.
Yes,
there's a lot of bad history about him that I've read later, but he really saved our lives because of this. He organized this rescue, and it was perfectly. And this rescue, I'm told, is still studied in some of the military academies as a perfect rescue attempt because no soldier died. No soldier was killed.
Oh my gosh!
And no prisoner was killed. Only the Japanese. Of course,
that is a textbook.
It's in the textbook. Yes.
That's fantastic.
But not in the newspaper, because on that same day, the Americans put up the flag in Iwo Jima, and all the newspapers saw the flag in Iwo Jima. But now it's the same day we were rescued, and so the newspapers didn't pay attention to us.
Of course.
They paid attention to that.
That is amazing. But now they know.
I just want to mention one thing about the rescue, that when we were in the barracks waiting for the shooting to stop, a big American soldier came in, followed by a couple of guerrillas. And I was frightened to death because he was a big man, sweating. And he took me in his arms, and he took me put me on his shoulder, and he took me to amphibious tanks that they had ready there to take us away. But in that short journey, I still remember him, and I still can smell his sweat, the gunpowder, and everything of him, and his white teeth. I couldn't believe that somebody had white teeth. Because many of the men and women lost their teeth during this war. And so it's just remarkable. I never got to know who he was, but this unknown soldier will always be a hero for me. Who took me on his shoulder and took me to this amphibious tank.
Were you alone, or was your family
with my father? With my father. And other soldiers and on. took my other family, especially my grandfather, who could hardly walk. They carried him. And so we were all rescued. They were all taken out. Some prisoners that did not want to leave. They were so frightened. And so Americans set fire to the barracks to get the people out, to make them leave. And all this I'm saying was told to me later, of course, when I was older.
Okay.
This was my second birthday, you might say.
Yes.
I was born again.
Yes, very much. Oh my gosh.
And my cousin Peter too.
That's right. Yes.
He was just a month old or so.
So that they got you to the amphibious vehicle.
Yes.
Where did they take you after that?
There was a military prison on the other side of a lake, and they took us to this prison. But of course, this prison for us was like a hotel.
Exactly.
Because they fed us little by little, again, but not to, because they couldn't give us too much at the same time. But we were there for at least a month, and they began feeding us little by little, and so on. What I most remember about this is that there was one tent that they used to show films, but of course, no war films, all comedies. And then I fell in love with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers.
Yes.
and those films, and then of course another place where they would read books. And my aunt Olive was Ted's wife, the Baptist missionary.
Yes.
And she would read in one of the tents, and lots of kids would go around and listen to her readings, and even adults would come. And I remember that to listen to her readings of books and so on. We were little by little returned to civilization. They put us on a ship, which was a troop ship, and a ship was called Eberly. It came with soldiers, and it went with soldiers, but mainly wounded soldiers. And then a lot of us went on that ship.
Gotcha.
But what I most remember about that trip was that I was seasick almost the whole time.
I'd be right there with you. Yeah. I don't do well on water.
I still get seasick.
Yeah, me also. Yes.
And another thing I remember very well on that ship was a nurse, a WAC, WAC, I think it's.
Oh yeah, yeah.
WAC.
I've heard of that.
Was a Navy nurse.
Yeah.
And she took special interest in me, and she would take me in the evenings to the deck. We were not supposed to go on the deck. Because it was still wartime.
Yes.
And so, but she took me to the deck to get fresh air because I was always sick. Yeah. Look at the stars. And she taught me that song. What is it, Diana? Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Her name was Betty. I remember Betty. And I don't remember anything else about her or what happened to her. But a wonderful woman, a young girl. Well, she was probably 20 something, and she was great. It was the mother I needed at the time, also.
Yes.
My aunt had a baby; it couldn't take care of me.
Right.
My grandmother had to take care of my grandfather.
Yes.
The men, I don't know what happened to them.
Yes.
And so this woman. did take care of me.
Well, she was a blessing, definitely. A very kind woman.
She tried to make me wear tennis shoes, and I refused. After being 3 years going barefooted, I couldn't wear shoes.
Right.
And so when we got to California, we were put up in a hotel by the Red Cross.
Yeah.
And the first thing they did there is took us to shopping to get clothes.
Yeah.
Torture. This was to me torture to get.
Oh no.
Clothes to put clothes on. I didn't want clothes on. I didn't want shoes, but they had to put socks and shoes and shirts and underwear. My goodness, terrible. But my grandfather, who was American, had had relatives in Mississippi. My grandfather Pedro had a sister in Mississippi, and one of her children was a priest, a Monsignor
Wow.
Jacoby. His name was Jacoby. The family name was Jacoby.
Okay.
Because he died young, also, and 50 something he died.
Wow.
Herman Jacoby. But Herman Jacoby went to for us and brought us to his parents' home. The Jacoby family had a bakery, and it was, for me, heaven.
Yes.
The bread and the pastry and so on, and they were so wonderful to us, and so it was a wonderful place. And then this same man, Herman Jacoby, who was the Archbishop's right-hand man in New Orleans, found jobs for the men, for my father, my uncles, and found them jobs, and found us a boarding house to stay and so on. Showed us a lot of things, the value of money. What was a dollar? We didn't, even the men didn't know the value of the dollar. And so there are so many things that we didn't know. One of the days was the 4th of July. The family from Mississippi came to New Orleans on the 4th of July to take us on a picnic in the city park. And they said, the best thing is comes later. And I said, okay, fine. And then they began shooting fireworks. For me, that was a nightmare, a nightmare. I drove under the table.
Yes.
Because for me, that was the bombing all over again.
Yes.
Fortunately, while I was under the table, I soon felt that I was not alone. My Aunt Greta was also under the table with me. And later, my relatives from the Jacoby family, they realized later the mistake. Yes. But of course, they didn't know.
Right.
And, but I still remember that.
And you can laugh about it.
Yeah, now I can. Yeah. I still don't like fireworks. I don't like fireworks anymore. No. I don't like any of that. Another nightmare.
Oh, God.
You have to remember that I didn't go to school.
Right.
For 3 years, okay?
Yeah.
And they stuck me in school in the 5th grade. I didn't know what a textbook looked like. I didn't know what a textbook was for. I didn't know what school was for. I didn't know what, and of course, I was laughed at. I was bullied. Everybody said, what a stupid fellow, what a stupid guy. I could hardly speak. I was ashamed to speak. And so it was really, really terrible. And of course, that year was useless. I didn't pass anything. The next year, they put me in a boarding school, religious school, and one of the brothers took an interest in me and did help me with schooling, with the books, with the relationship with the other kids, and so on. And I remember his brother Alfonso, was his name, Alphonsus. He took care of that. I was, able to adjust.
Nice.
And so, fortunately, another person who took interest in me that I'll never forget again.
Right at the right time, too. Right when you needed someone, they were sent. So,
much later, when I went through, passed, and after repeating the 5th grade again, then I finally able to go to 6th grade, 7th, 8th grade, and so on. But I learned a lot going to the public library after school, because my father worked. He then also got married to an American woman, Mildred. We didn't get along, but anyway, that's another great story. But they worked, both of them worked, and didn't get home until 5 or 6. And I got out of school at 3, and so I went. Very near the school was a public library. Nice. And there I did whatever studying homework I had to do, but I had a lot of time. Yeah. And so I remember the librarian asked me what would I be interested in reading. I said, I don't know. I can't read, or I don't read very well. said, well, let's start reading. And I read the Perry Mason books. And I enjoyed the Perry Mason books very much, because first it was easy reading, and that's where I learned how to read, and that got me interested in reading, and that reading which lasted all my life.
Yes,
I still have a good little library with lots of books that I've read and books that I still have to read. And at the end of the 8th grade, my father wanted to put me in a school to learn manual work, work with my hands, because he said, I'm too stupid to go to high school. I'm too dumb to go to high school. I said, well, maybe that's what you want. A brother of the Christian schools in I don't know if you know them, in New Orleans, they had De La Salle High School.
Yes.
Run by the Christian Brothers.
Absolutely.
In Covington, St. Paul's, it's run by the Christian Brothers.
Yes.
Well, this man came and talked to us in 8th grade, and I said, any of you want to become a brother, we'll take you to a place where you can learn to become a brother. And I said, me.
Wow.
I had no idea what to be about brother. But it would save me from going to a trade school,
right?
Which I had, as Deanna knows, I know nothing about using my hands for technology. Well, technology, but even a screwdriver for me is something foreign. And even to change a light bulb for me is difficult. And so to go to a trade school, even that I knew was not what I could do, I wanted. So I went to a special high school in Lafayette, Louisiana, and it's called a Junior 8. A Junior 8 was a normal school made for high school students who would later want to become Christian brothers. It's like a seminary.
Absolutely, yes.
Instead of being priests, being Christian brothers.
Yes.
So I was there for 4 years, and the best 4 years, I'd say almost of my life until then, because they took such wonderful care of me. There were never more than 10 students in a classroom, so the education was wonderful.
Yes.
They had education. We had sports. I didn't like sports, but I was obliged to do sports. Fortunately, they obliged me to do so. I wasn't going to volunteer. I was always the last one chosen on the team. I was terrible, except tennis. I became pretty good in tennis.
All right.
And I still like tennis, and I played tennis until I was middle-aged, you might say. But
nice.
And I still follow it very much today, and so I like tennis very much. Nice. And so the 4 years I was there was for me wonderful. It was the companionship, the wonderful teachers, because and they trained us well, because they expected us to become teachers, and so they gave us a good education, a good basis. And there finally I was able to do well in classes, and not called stupid, not called dumb. And so from there, after the 4 years, I got the habit of the Christian brother, became a Christian brother, and sent to Santa Fe, New Mexico. There I went to college, and the 4 years I made in 3 years by studying not only during not 9 months, but studying 12 months of the year. By studying 12 months of the year, I reduced my college to 3 years. Yeah,
congratulations! That is phenomenal.
And for being a stupid guy in grade school, which was for me was something good.
Yeah, chip on the shoulder. Yes, I understand.
And I graduated cum laude.
Congratulations! That's wonderful.
With a major in English and a minor in Spanish. Again, it was a wonderful experience, because they trained us to become teachers, and fortunately, because from then on until I retired at 70, I was a teacher. I've been a teacher all my life. I owe a lot to the Christian Brothers. I left the order for other personal reasons, but I'm very fortunate and very grateful to them for having given me this.
Very
much. And also because of through them, I got my master's degree in Notre Dame. I got my master's degree in modern languages, they called it.
Okay.
Which included English, Spanish, and French. El Paso, Texas, my first assignment, high school, and teaching English and Spanish. To teach English to kids who didn't know how to speak English well was almost like teaching English as a foreign language,
yes.
although we were in America.
Yes.
But in El Paso, which is on the frontier with Mexico,
right.
Yes. But almost worse was trying to teach them Spanish when they spoke Spanish at home, but their Spanish was not my Spanish.
Yeah.
And so this was also a big problem.
Well, we have that around here too. We have Cajun French and we have French, and I know that they have some.
They're not the same
differences. Yeah. Yeah.
No, I remember the kids saying, "That's not what my father says," or "That's not the way. Not the way my mother says it."
Yes.
Said, yes. What am I going to do?
Yes. Yeah.
This was a big challenge.
I can imagine. How long were you in El Paso?
El Paso, I was there for 2 or 3 years.
Nice.
From there, I went back to Santa Fe, but this time to the high school in Santa Fe, teaching English. Also, besides English and Spanish, of course, as a brother, I taught religion classes. In some schools, sometimes they needed a history teacher, and I taught history.
Nice.
I even taught algebra, although I'm sure Diana doesn't believe it. But I remember one year it must have been a basic algebra class, but a very basic because of some emergency or something, and I had to, of course, prepare it very well the night before because
yes.
math for me is terrible. I don't like math, and I can never understand it, and I don't.
I understand.
Well. And then from there, I went to New Jersey. New Jersey needed a Spanish teacher, and so they asked if they had the brothers in the New Orleans district if they had a Spanish teacher that they could borrow, and so they borrowed me. And so I was in New Jersey in a town called North Arlington. And North Arlington is right across the river from Manhattan. And most of the people who lived there worked actually in Manhattan. And it's like a suburb of
Absolutely.
Manhattan.
Yes.
And it was a wonderful school. But one of the problems I found there was it was a upper middle class people, the upper class students, a bit snotty, a bit who looked down on you.
Yes.
And who felt, why did they have to really learn Spanish? Spanish is not a civilized language. I felt, it was very difficult there, although the kids were wonderful, but in other ways.
Yes. But that's no way to go through life.
They felt superior. They felt
yes.
The parents, of course, but even some of the kids, although some of the kids were okay.
Yes.
From there, I was sent to Manhattan, to a high school in Manhattan.
Nice.
But there was the opposite. It was a small school on 14th Street, on West 14th Street, and it was a working class neighborhood, and the kids were wonderful. They were great, really, really great. Appreciative of everything done for them. It was
special.
It was very, very different attitude. The parents very appreciative. Yes. Even after leaving their parents, I had written to me after telling me thanks for what I had done for their kids and so on.
Oh.
Something that nobody did in North Arlington.
Right. Yes. That's nice.
Manhattan was wonderful.
Yes.
A big good thing also happened when I was in Manhattan is I had an uncle who was living in Manhattan also.
Okay.
As I said, my father had three brothers.
Three brothers.
Pedro was in New Orleans with my Aunt Greta, and then I had Louis and Andres in Spanish, and I think Andrew was named after him. because Andres and Andrew is the same. And so, but Louis was a single man, lived and working in a restaurant, in a Spanish restaurant in Manhattan, very near the school. And so I got to know him very well. And he would take me out very often on Saturdays, and we would go to concerts, we would go to musicals. He would show me Manhattan. It was wonderful. I have lots of pictures, photos in our album where he took. He was fanatic about pictures, and I think I inherited that from him also. But him, of course, and his father, the photographer. But and that's where I got to love musicals. I went to a lot of musicals.
Well, Andy likes them too.
Barbara Streisand on the stage before even before she was famous, and so on, and lots of other big stars, and took me to the opera. So this man took great interest in me. He was single, and so we enjoyed each other's company at that time. And so we were there. I was there for a couple of years in Manhattan. Yeah.
That is so good. Bonding with your uncle. That's wonderful.
Well, he later died in a residence of old age, I think. But, he never got married. No.
Okay. All right.
After Manhattan, I was sent to New Orleans to teach.
Okay.
In De La Salle High School on St. Charles Street. Or St. Charles Avenue. I don't know if it's there.
Anyway, Avenue. Yeah,
it's an avenue, I think now.
Yeah,
it's in De La Salle. I was put as the head of the foreign language department, and I was teaching Spanish there. But they had lots of other teachers, the Latin and Spanish and French and German, I think also. Wow. And so some of my cousins went to De La Salle. Andrew, I think, went to St. Paul's in Covington. I think I helped put him there in Covington. I went to the Christian Brothers School in Covington. But the other Peter, I know, went to De La Salle later, high school. Well, I was there for a couple of years until there was an exchange program between Spain and the United States for teachers. And I said, me. Always that going adventure. I signed up for the program, and I was elected for the program, and that's when I was sent to Spain. But the Christian Brothers told me, before you go to Spain, you have to pass to Rome first. I said, Rome? Okay, wonderful. I'd love to go to Rome. I said, but it's not for sightseeing. You have to go to the mother house. The mother house was the general headquarters of the Christian Brothers. I said, well, okay, I have to pass through that. But before I do that, before I go to Rome, can I see other parts of Europe first? I said, okay. I think to console me. So from the United States, I went to London, spent a few days in London. And then I went to Paris, and then I went to Italy, and then I went to the brothers' mother house in Rome.
Yes.
And there they put me through a third degree.
Yes.
Questionnaire, like a police interrogation. Five brothers from 5 different nationalities looking at me from a desk, asking me questions about morality and so on, about how to teach religion and so on. Well, I answered what I could. I answered sincerely what I felt about many things of morality, and said, okay, we'll give you 1 more year as a Christian brother, but you cannot teach religion. And so I said, okay. So they sent me to Spain for a year. But after that year, I said, what am I doing here? If I can't teach religion, why am I a Christian brother? You know,
Yes.
I don't have to be a Christian brother to teach English.
Exactly. Yes.
So that's when I left the order. And when I was here for 1 year. Okay, and I went to Cartagena. I was offered a job here in Cartagena. There, I went to a school, a general school, or for children, a private school, but also went to a private adult evening classes school, giving classes to adults, teaching English as a foreign language to adults.
Yes.
And that's where I met my wife. She was my student there. When I say this, people think, well, a student, a schoolgirl and a teacher, this relationship, that's a bad relationship. No, she was an adult.
Yes. Yes.
She was there to learn English in this private English academy, they call it. And so there I got to know her. She was working in a hospital there in Cartagena, and we went out and we fell in love and we got married. And Diana is one of the results of this union.
Yes.
Pete,
that's a wonderful. My goodness.
We've been married for 51 years?
51. Congratulations. That is incredible. That is wonderful. What a story. Oh my goodness.
Well, an interesting point. I'm talking too much.
No, you're not. No, please.
One of the things that when I came to Spain was in 1969, when the moon landing.
Yes.
I watched the moon landing on TV when I was in Rome, actually. I was in a hotel in Rome, and I watched the moon landing. No. The only big difference is the astronauts went to the moon and then went back home. I came to Spain and didn't go back home. In Spain now is my home. Cartagena is my home. And there I had my wife. I had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and we have her daughter, a granddaughter called Bianca, who's 10.
Beautiful name.
11 years old.
Great age.
Well, that's my story so far. That's me.
Pete, oh my gosh, Pete, I can't believe you didn't think this was going to be entertaining. My gosh.
I would like to mention
wonderful.
One thing I pointed out here. When I was living in New Orleans, I said that my aunt and uncle, Pedro and Greta, raised me. But although I had a father, but he got married and I didn't get along with them. And so that's why I went to live with my aunt and uncle. And they're and these are the Andrew's parents.
Yes.
And they were the most wonderful people in the world. I loved them so much. And my grandmother was also living with them. My grandfather died a couple of years after arriving in the United States.
Yes.
And so my grandmother lived with my aunt and uncle, and then with all the children. But I want to mention one thing. My cousins today have, I think, an opinion of my grandmother, which is different from mine, because they knew my grandmother when she was old and cranky. But I knew my grandmother when she was young and beautiful, and she was the businesswoman of my photography business. My grandfather was a great artist, great photographer, but nothing of business. And my grandmother took the business part completely, and she paid the bills, and she collected the bills, and she did everything, and did all the paperwork. And she was wonderful for me, and she was very generous to me, and she was a very different woman than when she was in her last years. And that's when my cousins knew her. Yes. And so they have and I would like to just to point this out. if they see me, if they say this, that their grandmother Teresa was not the same Teresa that they knew. She wasn't always this way. I think all of us change.
Absolutely.
I'm not the same person I was when I was 20 or 40 or even 60.
And look what she went through. Look at all the difficulties and challenges. Now, the last question, with all these things that you've been through, all of these experiences, what would you say has helped make you become the man that you are?
I don't know what would have happened to me if there was no war. If there was no war, if I had grown up in the Philippines and so on, I don't know what would happen to me, what I would be thinking, what life I would have had, and so on. What I do know is now I appreciate life more. Just a question of food, for example. For me, I appreciate food very much because of being so many years without. I can't stand the idea of throwing food away. For example, I get a bit impatient when I see somebody being picky with food. But of course it's not their fault. It's my fault. It's my way of thinking. But I think it's made me more responsible. It's made me appreciate life more than I think if nothing had happened. If I had the life that my father had. My father had a life of Gatsby, his friends, his clubs, and so on. A man who had a good job, had money, and so on. But his family came second. And maybe I'd have had the same thing, but I don't know. But I think now I'm more responsible. I think I've had a responsible life. I've been responsible, and I think I appreciated life more. I love my family more. I think so. I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh, it definitely does. Pete, thank you.